Access journalism has been a problem for as long as the game industry has existed. I mean, I'm fuzzy on the exact details of when it started, but at least since I was born, it was in full swing. Now with the release of Star Wars Outlaws and Dragon Age Veilguard, it seems like the roosters have come home to roost. I'm far more aware of the Dragon Age Veilguard or DAV situation, so that'll be my point of reference, but there's a lot of situations recently. Timeline. DAV is about to be released. Reviewers are invited, flown out, hosted, and maybe even fed to specifically make a video on the preview. This first preview being a vertical slice most likely. That's like a demo, but it's supposed to be better and shorter. Access media, that is YouTube and article writers for IGN or Kotaku, make their pieces and move on. Sometime later, they're invited back or sent downloadable demos showcasing more good parts of the game. Then a few weeks before the game releases, they're sent the full game to make a review on, publishing a few days before release when the embargo lifts. That's the technical term for the date that non-first party media is allowed to publish their material without some sort of punishment, but that differs based on company. A pretty notable misuse was Persona 5 developer Atlas striking people who showed too much story too early. The reason this system exists is because it benefits both parties. The game developer gets pre-orders and sales without making an advertisement, and the YouTuber gets to make money by having a video of an exclusive nature. Win-win, and for the plebeians who pre-order, lose. There's a lot of pre-orders despite even some access journalists vouching against it, often leaving out in their early access pieces. It's usually not one video either. The media is content to put out slot piece after slot piece on a work to maximize that exclusivity potential profits. If you're interested in DAV and followed skills up advice to check out other reviewers before purchasing, you've probably seen other people complaining that they didn't get access to a second preview or game if they made any negative comments.
I was even contacted by another content creator who had attended the event that asked me why my criticisms were worded more cautiously and asked me if I was concerned when I made my video that I'd be denied access to a review code. To which, of course, I replied, no, I'm not worried about getting denied access to review code. That simply doesn't happen in the gaming industry. But I was not concerned about this at all. I reassured him that he shouldn't be concerned about this because it's just not really a thing in the gaming industry. It's so rare that it shouldn't scare someone into not saying what they think about a game. So after publishing our video, nearly immediately, our contacts at EA and Bioware stopped replying and communication went to zero.
A lot of YouTubers don't understand that, but given how legendary Total Biscuit and pre-2018 Jim Sterling were, I think it's feigning ignorance to maintain a trusting audience in the next access code. This is the flip side of the cynical outlook. Rather than being cynical towards games and critique, a lot of media is cynically watching their profits. So those are your options. They're either lying or being so stupid and intentionally ignorant as to be malicious and lying. The illusion of choice. So why is access media so devious and dubious of their dastardly depraved actions? Even when caught red-handed, there is potential outside of not telling the truth for there to be a mental block that reads, at least if I'm not paid, I can maintain my lack of bias, which just isn't true. Everyone is biased. Truth-seeking, or revealing, perhaps, since it's media, is about recognizing that and aligning your biases to be ineffective or ultra-effective. Of course, people still claim they are unbiased, but also that their review is just their opinion. Bias and opinion are often buzzword synonyms if you didn't know. Now, if you're thinking that this is really overblown, 3 Dragon Age Veilguard reviews made it to top trending on YouTube. Sure, the game didn't make tons of sales, but the media did make lots of money. No joke, millions of views. Here are some bad examples. Star Wars After. Skill Up gave DAV 2 videos of good reviews saying how great the game looks, knowing that it's an RPG and has a zillion more hours than what he got to see, knowing he has shown a highlight reel.
Hello, editor with even worse audio here. So originally I said that Skill Up had actually told people to pre-order, but I wanted to cover all my chickens and say that no, he actually tells people explicitly not to pre-order. However, I think that having a pretty positive impressions video and then making a review video that disagrees with a lot of what you said in that impressions video, not on the basis of time either, just the direct quality contradictions, is a little two-faced. And I just wanted to make sure that this was covered because, again, he doesn't directly tell people to pre-order, but I do think that it's heavily implied. And again, well, I guess it'll cover it later. I don't think EA would ever give anybody a code just if they weren't expecting pre-orders to come from somebody. That's another reason why I think FextraLife was dodged, because I don't think that they actually thought that he would induce pre-orders. Thanks. Back to the video.
Then after release, he got to make a negative review. That's often the bite or hook that gets people to stay. A lot of companies no longer pay mind to what is said after the launch. The pre-orders and purchases are already in. So rather than continuing the memory that a YouTuber has helped to scam people, maybe that's a bit overly harsh, but I think it still sort of fits. Assuming the game is bad, which in most of these cases they are, they get to put out a vid critiquing the game, usually in a negative light, like not hammering down on anything and saying it's just my unbiased opinion. They get to stem the flow of future sales from their channel, which is very possible that a viewer never even saw that negative review, or even after release, YouTube may only recommend the positive reviews. In SkillUp's podcast, he says that he wanted a deeper review of the game since he felt like most were surface level. He is a reviewer, by the way. After that, SkillUp tries to be a bit more objective and just goes by numbers, but it's kind of obvious that he's worried about giving too much of a negative opinion, since almost every time that he talks about the game, it's something negative, and he's just like, well, I'm not so sure, but it's pretty bad. Mr. Matty gave Dav, I'd say, a slightly above mediocre impression, after release posting a pretty negative response and still saying that it's just mediocre. Matty comes in as probably the best case scenario since he, unintentionally, leaked how bad the game was to his editor, who leaked it to his friend, or another friend somewhere down the chain. However, this is not in any parity with a poll of a million sub YouTuber. A mistake like this could have long ongoing effects for his channel, like not being given more early access by not just BioWare, but potentially all of EA and other companies, since he now may be persona non grata due to failure of OPSEC. This can seriously hurt the bottom line of an access tuber. That's probably why, since Matty sold his word for money and failed both his fans and his company, that he probably put out an extremely sad and pitiful apology. You can read it yourself, but to me, it sounds like a 14-year-old apologizing for something bad he did without understanding anything. Buzzwords like bias, objective, and opinion all come up here. Last for Dav is FextraLife. I didn't know about this channel until I saw it in a Harmful Opinions video, and yeah, I did sort of recycle a line from his video. FextraLife didn't get a demo code since he, or they, since the channel may be an organization, said negative things about the vertical slice. So what's the problem, since they were honest about their review? Well, they actually complain about not being able to sell their soul hard enough and that they deserve a code. Not getting a code has never happened and it is their right. Okay, buddy chicanery. I do get it a little more since Fextra is more of a community resource and that getting ahead helps everyone who does play the game, but sure, that's not what they argue for. They're arguing for early access to make a negative review. This is pushed under the guise of honesty, but as I said before, no one understands their own bias, or at least lies about it to make it look better. Something that made waves a little further than normal was G-Man Live's video of Star Wars Outlaws. It's a generally positive review of only the demo, and he claims to like it. If you follow G-Man Live's metric for good and bad in general, it's everywhere, but on Star Wars Outlaws it's pretty egregious. He fillets the game for an hour despite previously being very critical of Ubislop, and then argues in his comments about how he's unbiased. It's roundabout, sure, but he is getting paid. He gets exclusive access to an anticipated product, releases it before the game comes out for good monetization, then makes the money. He didn't even play the full game, he only played a demo, and is still influencing people. So, how does this benefit the YouTuber? What are the effects of the YouTuber pushing an unreleased game? My throat is very dry. Let me take a drink. Subscribe. First, exclusive viewership and advertisements. Most people in the world don't know about a YouTuber. This is actually pretty common. If you go to a lot of videos from 2022 and 23, they'll usually mention that 95% of you guys aren't subscribed, and this still occasionally pops up. So if there's no or little crossover between a creator's audience and a game's interested audience, those people have a pretty high chance of wanting to hear things about that new game, so they view a video. Viewership entails a lot. If the video is YouTube monetized, there's a decent amount of ad revenue. If they shill their Patreon, that's more money. If they have a merch store, there's potential for a lot more purchases. If there's a sponsorship, that YouTuber's absolutely milking the video.
This video is brought to you by NVIDIA GeForce RTX 40 series GPUs, delivering industry-leading performance and unmatched visuals in games like Star Wars Outlaws, Black Myth Wukong, and Dragon Age the Veilguard. This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Pick up a new skill or just learn more about things like science, math, engineering, computer science, and so much more thanks to Brilliant's accessible and interactive courses.
Are you free this weekend? Good, because New World Eternum's open beta is live right now.
The exclusivity point isn't to be underestimated either. Creators who have that product exclusive are potentially siphoning viewership from others that don't have that game but would otherwise review it. It's also setting some viewers' opinions in stone, setting up their next viewership for potentially negative attention. The flip side is that YouTubers get a lot more time with the game, typically meaning more videos. SkillUp has made, I think, 5 or 6 videos. Matty has made 4, and this is pretty common as it allows a sheer multitude of videos, but also capitalization on the want for both positive and negative videos. How to fix it? Honestly, just hope for the best. Realistically, if there's a game that hasn't been released yet, don't even watch media on it, and after release, only watch people who made videos after release. Don't pre-order and all that good stuff. Really, there's just no way to tell how a game will end up being anymore due to manipulative marketing, and really anything you see before release, and even a year down the line due to updates, is probably not accurate to how the game will end up being. Barring that, developers could also just make good games, or publishers could just not market in sneaky ways. If you're staying, the rest of this is just going to be my opinion on everything that I've seen from DAV, that is Dragon Age Veilguard. I don't think any of it looks particularly good. I think the graphics are fine, but the style is kind of unfitting for Dragon Age. I'm not willing to say it's bad, but it's certainly not fitting. I think a lot of the races have lost their uniqueness. Elves seem a lot more human. Dwarves seem a lot more human. Kunari seem a lot more human. And in general, it feels like everything has kind of become a lot more bland in terms of racial differences, which to me has always been key about a fantasy world, is just the diversity of races. Because it's fantasy, I feel like it's supposed to take these to the extreme in a way that still allows for diversity and specialization and everything else in that. I think the Kunari are probably the worst case scenario. This already happened a little bit between every single game. In Dragon Age Origins, Sten was just a big human. He was a giant. In Dragon Age 2, they were giant, pillaging Viking marauders. They were demons, almost. In Dragon Age Inquisition, they were large and had horns, like they did in 2, but they were generally more human. And in Veilguard, they just seemed to be literally humans with horns. So while from the source material of DAO, it doesn't seem that different, but 2 I felt did the best job with the Kunari, which I know has been like a sticking point, but I think it's made especially worse because the Kunari characters are pretty bad. This kind of gets into writing, where I think almost all of the writing, having watched through I think a decent portion of the game, has been horrid. For some reason, it seems as if the game is marketed towards children or early teenagers, which is fine for something like a Call of Duty, but for a Dragon Age game where it's always been darker toned, even in Inquisition, which was still barely dark of neutral, Veilguard fails this completely. I think almost all of the stylistic changes of races, of demons, of characters has been for the worse. I really do not like how generic even the lore has gotten. The game, I believe, takes place mostly in the Tevinter Imperium. There's almost no lore that continues from the previous games. Darkspawn are literally just demons now who are summoned. There's no reference to broodmothers. There's no reference to the cannibalization that Darkspawn do, or how they're transformed. They seem completely different, and it's generally, it feels as if this game is not really a Dragon Age game at all. It feels as if somebody heard about Dragon Age, didn't play any of the games, or if they did not like them, and made a game out of that, which I don't think is to be unexpected. This is a completely new generation of BioWare. Even from Andromeda. Andromeda had maybe like 5%, 10% maybe max of the people who had previously worked on BioWare games, but this one feels completely devoid of any previous talent. Now, that's not to say that the people working there are bad. Video games are still like a highly technical prowess thing, but it's designed bad, it's written bad, and the art is not fitting. I think if all of these people made a new IP, or Veilguard was very clearly made to be like a folktale in the Dragon Age series, I think a lot of the writing or lore complaints would have been at least a little bit diminished, but it's a mainline game. And I think the direction is completely terrible. I disagree in general with a lot of the ramping up of stakes, because I think eventually people believe that they'll hit this point where they can't go down anymore, and that's just not the case. And I think Dragon Age 2, because that got really mixed reviews on launch, was a big downturn and a scary point for BioWare, where they do not want anymore to make a character-focused story, because they think that if they do, it'll be horrible. That being said, I don't think they could make a good character-written story anyway. Just the characters in Veilguard are generally all awful, whereas in 2, they were bad, but they weren't horrible, and there were still nuggets of gold in there, I felt. In Inquisition, they were almost completely neutral across the board. I don't think there's anybody I liked or disliked. And in DAO, of course, you know, it's hard to dislike a character. Maybe you're neutral on them, but as just a character who you're firmly focusing on the quality. Maybe you don't like opinions or traits that they hold, but as a character written in writing, DAO is very good. All of that seems to be lost in Veilguard. I think I'll eventually get to it. If you want to see that, subscribe, Lamau. But overall, it seems like a game that can be a total skip by Cyberpunk, by Kingdom Come Deliverance, by the original Dragon Age games. But Veilguard seems like a game that is designed for, I don't even want to say Bluey fans. I mean, that's probably the closest writing that there is for it, but I don't feel like Bluey fans would buy such a violent game. Really, the niche that this caters to is the Tumblr community. Don't get me wrong, Dragon Age actually does have a very strong fan base on Tumblr, but Tumblr gets a lot of its enjoyment out of reducing a character not having a reduced character, if that makes sense. They want characters to be good too. They just want to transform it into whatever they want, which is the putty that comes from a game to a community. The mold is already bad. They probably don't want it. And I can see a lot of people on Tumblr being like, I just don't feel like playing this. I'm going to play something else, which I think is a horrible takeaway for BioWare. In general, I think DAV is a terrible game for BioWare. A lot of people have been saying, oh, you know, it still has like almost 1 million players concurrent on launch. Compared to all these other games, you know, it doesn't need that many. And that's technically true, but the success that EA and BioWare were probably expecting from, God, when was Dragon Age Inquisition? 10 years ago? How much money was poured into this? How much time and effort and sweat and blood and tears and everything that can possibly go into a game was essentially wasted because the end result is not very good. I imagine that at most, DAV will make its money back and then some, but it is not the mega success that anyone could have hoped for. And it's funny to me, this is just going to go completely off topic now. It's funny to me because Cyberpunk launched in such a bad state and was so successful because the key writing was still good. It's not great, but it's still good. And Kingdom Come Deliverance has such an obtuse combat system. It's not bad, but it's definitely not easy to get with. And then DAV is so accessible. It's so easy. The wheel of dialogue is so easy to understand. The combat is very easy. The ability system is just number go up. It's very understandable, but the writing is bad. The level design is bad. The character environmental abilities are bad. And I can't imagine that anyone who understood the first few Dragon Age games could make this. If they did, their heads were pushed in the toilet, flushed down. They're like, get back to work. You're making that Kunari non-binary today, and then thrown away. And they were like, It doesn't feel like a Dragon Age game. It should not be a Dragon Age game. And it does make me worry for the future of BioWare quite a lot. Now, I kind of stopped caring after Inquisition. Inquisition was so boring to me. Like 4 or 5 out of 10 game. I have higher standards. But it's still playable. And whenever I look at BioWare, I'm not looking for playable. I'm looking for great. And for all the faults that all the previous games had, and there were tons of faults between Baldur's Gate all the way up until now, DAV has so many that it comes across to me as impossible to play. Not just it's bad and I'm gonna play it and I'm gonna have a neutral time. I feel like if I played this game, my brain would explode within like 5 to 10 minutes. It's not the combat. The combat is fine. It's how people talk to each other that really, really gets my goat. That really grinds my gears. Is that when people talk to each other, they talk like, I don't even think teenagers would talk like that, because teenagers would be so angsty, but it feels like there's no conflict. It feels like there's no character. It feels like everyone is almost the exact same besides their artistic design, which doesn't fit in. And so I guess what I want to say is look to my review of Veilguard in 2027, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.